welcome back to the newsletter. It's really lovely to see you. I hope you've had a good week. I thought I'd show you in this news basically what I've been doing for the last few days, and it all revolves around portraits. So I've been really challenging myself to work with the face and see what I can do with it. And partly that involves doing some painting, which I'll show you in a moment. But you can see based on the work behind me, I really do like portraits. I think they're just fascinating. It's human nature, isn't it? We're just interested in what other people's faces are like. You know, you might see a funny blob shape, you know, in the clouds or whatever, and you kind of see a face there. You imagine a face in a tree or something. It's just our human nature is that we look for faces and we respond to them. So I think when you put them in your work, then instantly can make your work really intriguing and fascinating. So yeah, I'm on this kind of drive to look at portraiture a little bit more and see how I can use that in my work. And I've got different kind of threads going along at the same time. So I've been working in my sketchbook. You'll have seen some of these pages before, no doubt, but in this book I'm working a lot with eyes, but also with looking at how you can simplify the head down to its barest minimum and it still be recognised. So basically taking things down to a silhouette, often with no features at all, but you know, we still recognise it as being a human head. And then sometimes bringing in just very, very simplified, abstracted features. I'm working with collage, I'm using some printmaking in here, so I'm using techniques like the Colograph monoprint. You know, we launched a workshop on that last week, and that's a great technique for working to your sketchbook with. So is collage. You know, these things are so quick and easy to do, you know, quite rapid. You can do quite a few in a session, and that's great when you're at the stage where you just want to burn through some ideas and see what happens if. So lots of the pages in this book are made during sessions like those. And you know what it's like when you do any kind of printmaking or collage, you end up with the decent bits and also a whole heap of also-rans and leftovers, and I'm using lots of those bits and bobs in pages in my sketchbook. So you can see I am working here in a really kind of stripped back, stylized way, so I'm reducing everything to its minimum in terms of the shape and the forms that I'm using, and also the colour palette as well, so you can see a lot of black and white in here. So I think this is interesting. This is taking my theme, if you like, down one path, and then I'm also doing some, you say, proper drawing and painting, and by proper I mean that it's more figurative, it's realistic, it kind of looks like it's what it's meant to be. Now I'm trying to be super accurate and realistic. So I've got these two paths that are happening parallel at the moment, and I think what's going to be really interesting is when they converge, collide together, and we see what happens if I can bring the two of them together. So this has been going on for a few weeks now, and then this week I've just added into the mix the idea of doing some portrait painting. So I've started off by doing basically some painted sketches. So this is the first of those sketches, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, what are you doing? Is it not easier to make a sketch on, you know, in your sketchbook or on some paper? And well, yes, of course it is. But you know me, I want to bring different things together. And part of what I do is I make art quilts. And I thought it would be really interesting to combine my painting with my art quilts and see if I could bring them together in some kind of meaningful way. So this is partly an experiment to that end as well. I've tried in the past lots of different things, and this is just something else that I want to try and pursue. So what I've got here is a board, a piece of MDF, 1/4 inch MDF wood, and I've stuck onto that a piece of quilt, because you know, obviously I make quilts, and if I'm fortunate, you know, they go off and they be exhibited somewhere, and then if I'm really lucky they sell while they're away and they never come home again. I never get to see them again. But obviously you end up with some coming back and they live the end of their days out in the roll under the bed. But I'm not ever happy with that, you know, that's just, what a waste of time for them to just stay under there. So after a while I'll go and rummage through that haul, pull one out, and I'll take scissors and a rotary cutter to it, and I'll give it a new lease of life. So this quilt that's on here has been chopped up and been used in lots of different pieces of work, but I had a section of it left. So I've stuck it down to this board because I thought it would be an interesting base to paint on. Now when it comes to quilting, I really like texture and stitch and lots of dense quilting, and it is that texture and that tactile quality that attracts me when I'm making a quilt. However, when I'm painting, I hate all of that. I don't like texture in painting. I'm not really fond of impasto, and I hardly even paint on canvas. I tend to paint on smooth wooden panels because I just like that very smooth surface when I'm painting. So why on earth I thought it would be a good idea to bring together quilts, when you don't like texture for painting, I have no idea. But anyway, my way around it was that I laid this panel with its quilt stuck onto it flat, formed some little barrier walls around this section, and then flooded this part with some acrylic pouring medium in an attempt to level off this bit of the quilt here. Because you know what happens when you quilt something, you introduce those hills and valleys. Well, they are not really nice to paint on, quite tricky. So I wanted to smooth off this section, and it has worked to a certain degree. I think for it to be perfect, I would need to do another coat and make it just that little bit thicker, because there's still quite a lot of subtle undulations in the surface here. And you might not be able to even see them at this distance, but trust me, when you're trying to paint on them, you can tell that they're there. And when you're really trying to focus on capturing a likeness, which is very difficult, in its own right, it's hard because you're trying to describe your subject with highlights and with shadows, in the mixing of your colour and your tonal values in your paint. But you're also battling against the highlights and shadows that are physically there because your surface is undulating. So I found that to be a real battle. You are really fighting against the physicality of this textured surface. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge, especially for the first experiment in this series. But I think maybe there is some mileage there. We'll see. This is quite a big panel here, so I'm thinking I might just chop that and have a go at something else on the bottom section there. We'll see. So that was day one. Couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours work onto that. So I'm just trying to do these as quick exercises. Day two, I switched to doing this one, which again it's still on a wooden panel, bit of MDF. This time I've stretched over it a little bit of just fabric, so no quilting on this one. I want that little subtle suggestion of some texture, but I decided against the quilted surface. It was just, you're wrestling with too much. So this I found was much nicer to paint on, much more enjoyable. Why make things difficult? This all went on much more smoothly. It was much nicer to actually physically paint it. And I think what was interesting, because obviously it's the same subject matter painted twice. There's my reference photo over there, just taped up to the easel. What was really heartening for me was that I felt so much more, I think fluent is the right word to use, so much more fluent on day two than I did on day one. And isn't that encouraging? In just that one day, I felt much more comfortable with my subject, with the colour mixing that I was doing, with how I was laying the paint down. It just seemed to flow a lot more on day two. Portraiture, it's the ultimate challenge, isn't it? You're not only grappling with a likeness, and I know, you all know this face as well as I do. So instantly, you can't do anything but sort of think, well, does it look like her? That's natural, isn't it? And I think, you kindly got that to deal with, as well as the actual just painting of the form. And that's something else that I'm really trying to grapple with. It's very, very tempting to just draw the features. And what I'm trying to do is to train myself to paint the volume of the head. So instead of drawing the eyes, I'm trying to paint the eye sockets, if you like. So I'm really trying to get the mass of the head in, rather than just what you kind of think is of being the interesting bits. You almost need to underpaint those, I've found, in just these two experiments. The less I painted them, the better it was. But yeah, skin. Painting skin is just the hardest thing. Do you agree? I think some people would imagine that maybe painting sky or water is tricky, but I reckon skin is worse. It's never the same. It's never still. You might be working from a photo, yeah, whatever. You want to bring life into your painting, so you've got to paint it as like that's living flesh. Well, that skin, that living flesh and skin, it's never still, is it? It changes with the flush of an emotion, with a glance, with a bit of, with all that personality and character and expression. It's constantly moving. It is never still and never static. So trying to capture that with paint is just, it is the ultimate challenge, but it's one that I'm really, really enjoying. And I think it's good to kind of try and build some of those neural pathways, isn't it? So I've been working on these with acrylic paint. So I kept my palette really simple. Let me show you what I've been using. I've been using these golden open paints. I've got my palette here, I'll just open it up and show you. So this is a Stay Wet palette. And I would encourage you to use a Stay Wet palette because it's awful to throw paint away if you don't need to. And if you use one of these, then you know the next day when you come back to paint some more, that the paint's all still going to be viable and usable, and that's really good. So this is a commercial one that, I bought, but they're dead easy to make. You can just use a flat tray palette if you have one, or a shallow tub of some description. Put some dampened kitchen roll in the bottom and some greaseproof paper on top, and you've got yourself a palette there. And just cover it over when you're not painting with it. So yeah, because these are quite expensive, but making your own, dead easy and quick. I think we've got a post on how to do it on our website, so if I can find that, I'll link it in the description. But I kept my palette really simple and limited, basically because I actually haven't got very many paint colours in these open paints that I wanted to use. So I started off with the first one, really, really limited. Hansa yellow, Pyrrole red, phthalo blue and titanium white. And I painted that whole thing with just those 3 colours plus white. Which I think was a really good challenge to try and force all that colour mixing to happen by really keeping it to the basics. But I was really, really missing having a cool red, because this Pyrrole red, it's like a cadmium red, so it lurks at the warmer end of the scale. And I wanted something like an alizarin crimson, which I didn't actually happen to have, but I'd got some Quin crimson. So I put a little bit of that on my palette for day 2. And I also added some yellow ochre. So, added in those 2 colours and a little bit of Mars black as well. So still keeping it though, that's pretty minimal in terms of your basic colours. But I found that gave me really everything that I needed to paint that little study there. So I think that was a good challenge. It's tempting, isn't it, to put all the colours out, but it's so much better to try and learn how to mix your, with just a few. So my challenge to myself that I'm going to keep working on over the rest of this week and in coming weeks is to just keep painting, really, because I'm hoping that if I noticed that degree of improvement, or at least a better feeling from one day to the next, that if I carry on, it's really going to build on that. But I don't want to fill up the whole studio with all these wooden panels. I won't be able to move. So in anticipation of doing lots more, I've been prepping some bits of card. So these are just some mount board offcuts that I found in the drawer, and I've prepped them with a bit of gesso. So if you prime them just on one side, they tend to really curl. So I've primed them on both sides, and I'll just see which one looks the best to paint on. But I think with these just being cardboard, they're not going to take up much space. It's very inexpensive, and I'm not going to feel precious. So I think I'll really be able to crack on with lots more kind of trials and experiments and painted sketches. So cross your fingers for me, but that's my mission really for the next bit of work that I really want to focus on. So I hope you've been interested in seeing what I've been doing, and I hope that you've been really productive this week too. We would love for you to pop a like on this video, a comment if you have one, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy our videos. And don't forget, there's loads more over on our website, which you find at designmatterstv.com. Thanks for watching, I'll see you again soon.